Good afternoon, Trinity Lutheran Church. My name is Dan Shavey. I grew up in Maple Grove, Minnesota, which is a northwest suburb of Minneapolis. After I graduated from high school, I attended Calvin College here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, to pursue a degree in computer science. After graduating, I worked as a database administrator for the better part of a year, and then transitioned to working as a youth worker, which I did for about 10 years in various congregations across the Midwest and even in Canada. One of these congregations was St. Luke's Lutheran Church just up the road from here. I worked as a youth worker all the way up to and including my time at Luther Seminary. Last year, I graduated with a master's in divinity with a concentration in children, youth, and family ministry. One of the many things that excites me about Trinity Lutheran Church is how it is a congregation with a heart for the city, echoing the words we find in Jeremiah chapter 29 in the letter to the exiles. I love how this congregation has deep partnerships with Degage Ministries and Family Promise of Grand Rapids, and how it wishes to reach out into the community to those who have been beaten down or just experienced life difficulties for whatever reason, and try to show the love of God to them and help them to find a better road forward. It really excites me to think about what a partnership with this congregation may look like.
Hi, my name is Alexis Shavey, and I'm Dan's wife. We've been married for almost 6 years now, and we already have a special connection to Trinity, as it's the church that we got married in back in 2010. We met almost 10 years ago in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is my hometown. I'm happy to say that I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, and the idea of returning back to my hometown is just a wonderful thought. A little bit about me. I am an academic advisor at St. Cloud State University in St. Cloud, Minnesota. When I lived in Grand Rapids, I was an academic advisor at Davenport University, and I was also a volunteer coordinator. I'm very passionate about helping others, and I have a long history of volunteering in the Grand Rapids community. One of the things that I was really excited about when we were looking over the Trinity profile was their connection with the countywide food drive. That's something that I have very fond memories of participating in. As a little girl, every fall, my family and I would go door to door through the communities and help asking for food to help stock the food shelters. And as I got older, I would help out with that same initiative in my youth group and in various Bible studies, and I love the idea of being able to do that in a new church community, and also getting my son involved with that as well. Most of all, what I'm looking forward to at Trinity is getting connected with a new church family, and I hope to meet you all soon. Thanks.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. I am glad to be here. My name is Dan Shavey, and apparently I am the keeper of the root beer floats. But today I want to talk about currents of Christianity, because I find currents to be very, very interesting and wonderful and beautiful. And I thank you that we've all gathered today, and as I've been listening to presentations over the past few days, I've heard this current come up. This is the Grand Canyon. Thank you. The Grand Canyon was carved by that blue thing in there, which is the Colorado River, isn't it? I had to look that up because I've never been there. But I love nature, and I think it's beautiful. And running water is exceptionally powerful, is it not? Hasn't running water carved the majority of the world we live in? That every place we walk is carved by running water. The cool thing, though, is running water. The power of it is not in the waves, it's not in the ripples, it's not in the sound it makes, but it's in the deep current that drives the river, is it not? And that is the current that drove the river. So the current of the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon. I think there is a current deep within our Christianity that has guided us for over 2,000 years, that has guided and directed us in maybe not the best direction. And everything we've been talking about over these past 2 days, I think stems from the movement of this current. But we have to ask ourselves, how do we figure out just what in the world this current is? We figure it out by the same way we figure out looking at a river. We look at the ripples, we look at seeing what's going on top. I think the first thing we notice about the current of Christianity in our current world today is that people are leaving the faith in astounding numbers. People are walking out of the church at an alarming rate that just flabbergasts the mind. People are leaving the church in amazing numbers, never, ever to return. And there have been a lot of people who have looked into this. David Kinnaman, who I always call Dan for some reason, works with the Barna Research Group, doesn't he? And he spent thousands of hours talking to people who have personally divested from the church to say, you know what, I'm out. And he's asked them why. The Pew Research Center, a couple years ago, they released an article called The Rise of the Nuns. Has anybody read that one? Where they noted that the fastest growing religion in America today is the nuns, those who are unaffiliated with the church, those who wish no form of religious identification. They say, we are not. I witnessed this just after I graduated from college. I participated in a postmodern church plant in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And get this, the ministry, the mission goal was to reach the dechurched and unchurched people of the community. Back in 2001, this was a massive problem. And I remember in all those conversations, chatting with people, hearing about deep-rooted pain in the lives of these young people who had walked away from the church, where they had encountered something other, something where they were pushed out and said, you're no longer welcome here because you did this, this happened to you, your hair's a different color, this is what's going on. And they felt it. And so we have to ask ourselves, what's driving this? This is a quote from that Rise of the Nuns article. It says, with few exceptions, though, the unaffiliated say that they are not looking for a religion that would be right for them. Overwhelmingly, they think that religious organizations are too concerned with money, power, too focused on rules, and too involved in politics. Something has happened within our church that has caused us to be obsessed with money and power, politics, and rules. But it goes a little deeper than that. There's a disconnect keenly observed by a guy named Rob Bell. Maybe you've heard of him. I encountered him when I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In his slightly controversial book called Love Wins, this is actually the back cover of the book. He says, God loves us. God offers us everlasting life by grace freely through no merit on our part. Unless you do not respond the right way, then God will torture you forever in hell. Huh? But is that not the message of contemporary Christianity in America? Where people come into the church and say, we're looking for a different norm. We lived in this world our entire lives focused on money, power, rules, obligation, fear, and shame, shoving us in directions. And they come to the church saying, we want something different. We hear there's something different. We hear you talk about a God of love. And then they run into something in the church where they hear the same old crap, don't they? Has it happened to you? Because it's happened to me. And they just pick up and leave, never to return. So we ask ourselves, where does this language come from? And I do believe it stems back to the language of Christendom and the language of empire. When about 1,500 years ago, Constantine made Christianity the official state religion of the Holy Roman Empire, where Christianity instantaneously went from being the religion of the powerless, the weak, the outcast, the foreigner, and the alien, to being the religion of the powerful, the prestigious. And what Christianity had to do was make that jump to say, how do we begin to organize ourselves? And I believe this stem comes from when the Christian church began to organize itself in the ways similar to the Roman Empire. To say, we will be an organization about power. We will be an organization that has influence. And I think if we're honest, we see this in the churches around us today, where the institution of church has been shaking, and we've had to ask ourselves, are we going to hold on to the idea of the institutional church, or are we going to let go and try to find something else? And to me, this is the deep-rooted question of contemporary Christianity in America today. We have this stream of Christendom where we know where it's gone, we know where it's going, we know how it feels. But is there an alternative? Is there another way to be church? Is there another way to go about expressing this thing we call Christ? And the beautiful thing is, within the Christian scriptures, we find that there's this consistent countercurrent against empire. This consistent countercurrent where God reaches out to the foreigner, the outcast, and the alien and says, you are welcome here. Isn't that interesting that we actually have laws in the book of Deuteronomy where we're told you can't harvest all of your own crops. You have to leave some for the people who don't have any. And yet, in our churches today, do we do the same thing? And so we have to ask ourselves, where do we find this language, this new language? And I would suggest it's the language of love. But we have to ask ourselves, how do we define the language of love? Because the language of love in Christendom and that language of empire is defined as obedience and fealty. You will do what I say, because I'm in charge. And if you do what I say, I'll be good to you, right? Isn't that kind of how it goes? And so if we look at where to redefine this language of love in a different way, not in a way concerned about power and authority, I think we find that in the language of Paul. I'm a bit ahead of myself here, but I'll slow down. That's okay. Because Paul seems to talk about, well, at least Paul and the Gospel of John and the letters attributed to John, there seems to be this refrain that comes up where it talks about a God who loves and calls us to love in a way slightly different than empire. But I don't know about y'all, but when I read those passages, I was trained to read them through the lens of empire, through the lens of power, that God is mightyful and powerful, and I should obey. But I think this countercurrent offers us a different idea of what this kind of love might look like. And for me, my mind has been shattered by one of our professors here at Luther. Maybe this has happened to you as well. You came into a classroom and he didn't have a syllabus, and he told you, we're just going to explore the Bible and some of the writings of Paul. Yes! David Fredrickson has opened my eyes to wonderful ideas of what this different language might be. And he focuses it in Philippians 2 in the Christ hymn, where he talks about this God who loves you, but not in this mechanical way, but in this organic, emotional, erotic way where this God longs to be with you. And when you're not in that God's presence, this God is torn up inside so much that it chases after you and seeks to be with you. Caught up in these words, eros, pathos, and kenosis, where this God longs to be in your presence. And when you're not in that presence, there's dissidence there and attempts to pour itself out so completely that this is a different idea of love. That if we hold on to this concept of love, I think everything changes. Because if love is about longing, if love is about me being in connection with you and not about you obeying what I tell you to do, I think that completely re-identifies, revolutionizes everything about Christianity in our world today. One of the many points I have around this is to think about, how does this change our Christology? How does this change the way we go about thinking about atonement? So many of the atonement theories I've encountered in my life are just connected to Anselm, where he talks about atonement as this economic exchange. God takes what you have and gives you forgiveness, right? But instead to think about yourself as beloved. Not indebted, but loved. Yes, you're still a sinner. Yes, there's a wrong relationship between you and God, but this God loves you so much that it's going to reach out and chase after you and try to hold on to you and be in your presence. But to me, that asks the question, why? Why do we need to change this? Why do we need to lean into this different stream? And I'd like to offer this suggestion. It can't be because this is the future of the church. Because if we hold on to that idea, we're just back to a realm of economy. Where if we don't make this move, the church won't exist anymore. That's just power. That's just economics. I think if we lean into this stream, it's because this is who God really is. A God who truly loves and longs to be with us. To change the primary metaphor in our mind's eye when we think about how God sees us, away from the idea of faulty or indebted or wrong, but as beloved. That'll be good.